I mentioned before that Detective School Q was that one anime series that found me and vice versa during my time as a 12-year-old sixth grader back in 2004, to the point where I considered this anime series to be my gateway one to Animax. However, let's fast forward to 2011. As in April 2011, which was the month and the year that I graduated from my senior year of high school. And as a graduation present, I went to Hong Kong with my dad, mom, younger sister, and younger brother. And I went to HMV to purchase some anime DVDs. And one anime DVD caught me by total surprise because this was an anime series that I kind of had vague memories of watching on Animax, mainly its promos, but didn't start watching it to the full until I purchased that particular anime DVD. And I'm of course referring to Welcome to the NHK. This was an anime series that I did not expect myself to be a hardcore devotee of, let alone someone who is thoroughly invested in this anime, because when I first caught the promos on Animax, roughly back in 2007 or 2008, I was convinced that this was more of a dark comedy dealing with guys who are addicted to things that they shouldn't be finding themselves in, like online porn, or even get themselves into hentai games and that type of nature. But as I earnestly watched all 24 episodes of Welcome to the NHK, even on repeat and even on a successive rate, I found myself digging in deeper as to what made this anime special for me as someone who was a 19-year-old studying acting in film school. What made me thoroughly enjoy Welcome to the NHK during the time I was a 19-year-old in film school was the overall message that I acquired from this anime. First of all, Welcome to the NHK deals with a hikikomori, or recluse, or shut-in, by the name of Tatsuhiro Sato, who is a 22-year-old college dropout who feels like his whole life, let alone existence as a shut-in, is a product of an evil organization called the NHK, or Nihon Hikikomori Kyokai, a play on words from the original NHK, which is the Japanese network, television network, that thankfully does not turn people into hikikomori, but is also known for airing a lot of educational content. So one day, just as Sato is about to accept his fate by that said imaginary organization, Misaki Nakahara, a young unassuming girl of 18 years old, enters his life and wants to basically convert him into the more normal side and wants to save him. However, in Sato's mind, is this girl a saving angel, or is she someone who is part of the NHK's evil machinations? And along the way, Sato also encounters his childhood acquaintance, let alone acquaintance that he met during his high school days, in the form of Kaoru Yamazaki, in which, in his own way, Sato tried to protect him from being physically bullied, and from that moment of reuniting with Yamazaki, Sato also finds himself engaged with the otaku culture, considering that Yamazaki fled from his native hometown to Tokyo to want to become a game designer and someone who wants to be involved in anime and video games. And of course, Hitomi Kashiwa, who is Sato's senior during his high school years. But even though she seems to live a normal life and has a stable job working for the government, she still has her own vices, like popping pills and believing in a lot of conspiracy theories. So what I've acquired from Welcome to the NHK is a story, and a thought-provoking one at that, of lonely people trying to find connection in their lives as they deal with not only their own vices, but also their various coping mechanisms just to try to survive in a world that is unforgiving to them. And that's what I've managed to feel from Welcome to the NHK, and why its characters are very understandable the first time I watched it, as someone who was about to say fare thee well to my teenage years as a 19-year-old, and slowly but surely transitioned to my 20s during the early 2010s. So this experience that I had with Welcome to the NHK made me question my worth and myself as a person, made me question my purpose as a human being, and also made me think about how much am I willing to live my life as an individual, which is something that you don't often get, let alone acquire, in anime that otherwise feels a lot more escapist, whether they are from the isekai sort or the giant mecha robot sort or even the shonen sort. You don't often receive an anime series that makes you question your worth a lot more as a person, or even wants to help you to strive to connect with people and find genuine connections with them, even though you may not have the answers to everything. And when I look at Welcome to the NHK, and even the several times I've been rewatching it and hearing a lot of what other anime video essayists and reviewers have to proclaim about it, one thing really does pop into my mind, and that is relatability. I'm able to relate to Tatsuhiro Sato's feelings of isolation and frustration for feeling like the world is against him, and just understanding where Sato comes from. He pretty much shuts himself out of necessity before realizing that shutting himself out won't do him that much good, and he has to make painful yet necessary steps forward to be a somewhat better person. And the greatest thing about Sato is that his relatability comes from the reality that every progress you make as a person will also be accompanied by failures, disappointments, and setbacks. Because, as we all know, success is not an easy way street, nor is it something that's completely linear. You'll have your setbacks, you'll have your relapses, you'll also have moments where you almost want to give up or just throw the towel in. And in terms of Sato, I do understand where he's coming from. There are also occasions in which he does fall into certain pyramid schemes or vices that ends up kind of distorting his reality as a whole. And there are also times that he has to face some really, really hard truths. And it's not out of something that will make him better immediately, but in a way that would help him to improve on a gradual, if not painful, basis. And in terms of Sato's journey, I did feel it from him. I felt so many emotions from him, let alone trials from him, to the point where I understand where he's coming from. I understand that he does serve as a mirror to take a cold, hard look at myself and realize that isolation and the need to constantly shut myself in is not the way to go. It's very important to take steps forward in stride, and whether the results might be great or not great, at least you made the first step. And that's what's something that Sato has also taught me as a person. And I would not have to talk about Sato without mentioning Kaoru Yamazaki, because he's actually my favorite character in this particular anime series. And I know that what Yamazaki represents is something slightly more questionable once you peel back every single layer about him. But what you see in Yamazaki is someone who is lonely, someone who feels that genuine human connections can be questionable given his experiences when he was a young boy with this one girl who said that they'll meet each other at a festival, but she said that she has to be there for her grandmother because she's ill, until he finds her with another boy. And that particular experience did kind of distort Yamazaki's opinions about girls, let alone people around him. And that's why he uses his passion for anime, video games, and even eroge games as a coping mechanism, not only to try to build up a career and even rebel against the life that his parents tried to cultivate for him, because he tries so hard to want to be this game designer for video games, visual novels, and anime, but he also uses those passions as a shield. I definitely also felt for Yamazaki, because while I may not always agree with his overall anime tastes, I mean, hello, the guy has a lot of posters and figurines of mostly cat girls, especially one notable one being Bururin. And he also has a lot of collections of eroge visual novels and posters. And whilst I understand where he's also coming from, I could also see that he also uses that as a shield for his own loneliness. And he is very driven to just use that passion to want to cultivate something that is unique, palpable, and something that he believes will help him be his own creator and his own man. And the bond between Sato and Yamazaki is certainly no accident, considering that Yamazaki was badly bullied when he was in middle school until Sato stepped in to try to stop the bullies, but ended up being beaten himself. And from that moment, Yamazaki started to respect Sato and wanted to be in his literature club. And just when Sato ended up spending his early 20s as a hikikomori, or a shut-in, he hears all this loud music from next door and can't take it anymore until he finds out that Yamazaki was that next door neighbor who had been blasting Pururin's theme music on such a loud stereo to the point where it kind of irritated him. And as the two end up reconvening, Kaoru, or Yamazaki, also introduces Sato to his world of anime, visual novels, eroge games, and manga. And you could say that Yamazaki was that one person who knew Sato personally to give him some level or gumption of trying to make something of himself, considering that Yamazaki is so keen on developing a game, well, eroge novel game, in which he conceptualizes the character designs and all of the coloring and all of the concepts, whereas Sato is mainly relegated to writing the story. So at least that was that one gumption forward, although when Sato tries to get an idea of how this thing works, he ends up going one step forward, two steps backward, which just makes their bond all the more hilarious, but also all the more relatable. I dare not forget about Misaki Nakahara, who is also one of the other core characters of the entire anime, let alone story. I know that in the anime, Misaki is a lot more of a genuinely sweet creature, let alone someone who is a lot more down to earth and a lot more altruistic in her own sense, even though she does have her own issues with trying to be the best version of herself, and uses trying to save Sato for her own means of no longer being self-loathing or no longer suffering from some really traumatic and really horrible experiences in her life growing up. And I know that the manga and the visual novel, by that extent, has Misaki be a lot more of a manipulative person and be just as kind of mean-spirited. But the anime version of Misaki has a lot more going for herself, and she's more than just that sweet, pretty face that wants to save Sato. And I know I'm going to go into spoiler territory, but there are also instances that you see Misaki grow up in a very dysfunctional home life before being quote-unquote adopted by her uncle and auntie. And trust me, if you haven't watched the anime before and you don't want to be spoiled, you'll have to see it for yourself. What Misaki went through with her mother and her stepfather will make you want to grab some Kleenex and make you understand everything that she was going through at that formative age. And you could also understand the motives as to why she is trying to help Sato so that she could also be assuaged of her own extremely compromising and tragic backstory when she was a kid. Nevertheless, Misaki is definitely a character you could also write a book about because of everything that she went through when she was a very young girl, and also why she uses that whole program to save Hikikomori as kind of a front to also save herself. I mean, for instance, mainly reading all of the stuff that she's found from several books, psychological books, as if though that she were a lecturer who is not really explaining what they really mean, but also someone who is just still trying to figure out for herself what they all mean, in the hopes that Sato would listen to her and therefore pay close attention to her. This was another relationship that fascinated me because of how multi-layered it is. Now, you might think that it's this whole sweet manic pixie dream girl coming to save the troubled guy, but both Sato and Misaki are just as troubled as each other, but in different ways. I know that not a lot of people love their relationship or even care about it too much, but I actually found myself caring for the bond between Sato and Misaki. On a lot of occasions, it's basically going 2 steps forward, 2 to 3 steps backwards, and their bond isn't anything that's completely linear, but it can also show signs of progress, signs of regression, but also signs that at least they have come to understand each other and also cultivate a bond that doesn't need over dramatic displays of romance or romantic tension. It's basically people just trying to let each other in, but at the same time nearly shutting each other out, but also just trying to find compassion and connection in a world that is extremely cruel and unforgiving. And that's what I also felt for Misaki, not only as an individual, but during her times with Sato, let alone her sessions with him, as well as when she feeds a stray cat tuna to also attempt to try to build some connection with it and also understand where she's also coming from. So aside from Sato, Yamazaki, and Misaki, there's also Hitomi Kashiwa, who was Sato's senior during his high school years, who introduced him to a lot of these conspiracy theories. And they were also lonely souls during their high school years, to the point where they also talked to each other about all these existential topics, considering that Sato was once a high school student who was not really that interested in academics and kind of found himself to be a loner, and a sort of dark loner at that, with Hitomi basically complementing his kind of dark view on the world around him. And even though Hitomi might feel pretty well off, considering that she has a job and that she is getting well paid and has a fiance, she feels intrinsically lonely, considering the times that she pops pills and talks about all these strange conspiracies as well. And of course, her fiance not always being there for her romantically, let alone intimately. And then finding that kind of bond that Sato and herself have created based on their own really dark and unforgiving views of the world around them and what they feel are conspiracies. And speaking about drugs, it's also mentioned in the manga that, or even the visual novel, that the reason why Sato has all of these hallucinations and all of these strange things that he sees nearly every time is also because Sato himself is also a drug addict. And I'm pretty sure that the anime did not want to be too explicit about his drug intake, but also show that it's implied that he also had been taking, let alone abusing, those drugs, which has also caused him to see things that not a lot of people would see on a daily basis. So with Hitomi, that loneliness also comes from feeling like she is still trying to cope, yet is still struggling with her daily life. Aside from the main four, there's also the likes of Megumi Kobayashi, a very promising student during her high school days, considering that she was also the president of the school, or let alone her class, but had found herself in really rough times when her father was ill and her older brother ended up becoming a shut-in himself, to the point where she had to work a lot of odd jobs before finding herself in a pyramid scheme, and therefore being just as much of a purveyor of said scheme, to the point where she even tried to recruit Sato. And you may not understand her, or you may not like her, but I do also understand where she's coming from, falling for this particular MLM and therefore being as much of a purveyor of it, just to try to not only support herself but also her family, considering that they're going through hard times. And of course, her older brother, Yoichi, he definitely had my heart because he presents himself as a very sad, isolated, and troubled young man who fears seeing other people. And it's hard not to feel sorry for him, but it's also hard not to root for him when he realizes that it's time for him to leave that nest of his room and go find himself a job if he wants to have more food and therefore not starve anymore. I could go on and on and on about all the characters in Welcome to the NHK, but suffice to say, all these characters were people I had learned to not only understand, but also relate to on various levels. And my heart does go out to each and every one of them, even though I don't always agree with their choices, even though I don't always agree of their beliefs. And that's what you call great character writing through Welcome to the NHK. Characters that I felt for, characters that I understood with nearly every single fiber of my being, and characters that made me feel a lot of emotions from them, ranging from sadness to hope to disappointment to compassion and empathy, that made this particular anime series strong. And why it remains so strong is because of Tatsuhiko Takimoto, who himself was once a hikikomori when he wrote this, and he even admitted that at times it felt so difficult, let alone compromising, to construct Welcome to the NHK, not only because of the topics that hit home for him, but also because the entirety of that story was also based on a fictionalized version of himself. In fact, Tatsuhiro Sato, the main so-called hero, let alone anti-hero of Welcome to the NHK, was based off of Tatsuhiko Takimoto in a more exaggerated sense. He even stated that Welcome to the NHK was somehow both a blessing but also a curse, because it did hit home for him. And just like this entire experience I had with Welcome to the NHK, it managed to really hit home for me just how much it hurts to see what these characters are going through, but also made me understand them, and also made sure that I made better choices in my life as a person and as someone who basically kind of went through some of the similar things that they did. After all, it's not easy just experiencing an anime that talks about the not so pleasant aspects of being a hikikomori or otaku culture, or even shedding light to some really compromising topics like online suicide pacts, MLMs, glorified RPGs that have become nothing more than gambling, let alone online gambling, addiction to drugs, and addiction to pornography, as well as just the feeling of loneliness and self-loathing and hopelessness that people who've dealt with being shut-ins have faced. And that's the real beauty about Welcome to the NHK. Its dark comedy didn't make me feel like everything's gonna be okay. It made me understand that not everything in life is gonna be sunshine and rainbows. And Welcome to the NHK was a strong reflection of that. And it was also reflected on the cast involved. I mean, on the Japanese side, I definitely enjoyed Yutaka Koizumi as Tatsuro Sato, Yui Makino, who actually stole the show, as Misaki, Daisuke Sakaguchi as Yamazaki, and Sanae Kobayashi giving such a wonderfully nuanced portrayal of Hitomi and her self-loathing. But I must give it to the English voice actors for selling their roles so beautifully. Chris Patton definitely made Sato a wonderfully relatable shut-in who, although has his own experiences with mania, still manages to make me feel for everything that Sato is going through. And that is what Chris Patton did with Sato. Turn him from an otherwise unlikable yet kind of unhinged person to someone I learned to empathize with, and someone that I was not afraid to show compassion towards, even with his more questionable sides. Then you got Stephanie Whittles, who voiced Misaki, and I'm willing to defend her on everything that she embodied as Misaki, because she also did embody her with that mysteriousness, yet also an innocence to her that comes from just trying to live her life, even though it would be painful for her. Greg Ayers definitely stole the show as Yamazaki, considering how he was able to bring in both that otaku mania, but also that anger that he has not only for himself, but for feeling like there's people that he could barely trust, and of course that anger from also being isolated or for isolating himself from different people. Lucy Christian as Hitomi Kashiwa was definitely someone I felt for. She brought in a lot of nuance and a lot of grace, yet also that mystique to Hitomi. And I dare not forget about Monica Rial as Megumi Kobayashi, as well as Nanako Midorikawa. In fact, the voice actors from the Japanese and the English dubs definitely brought varying degrees of authenticity to their characters, to the point where I really felt for them, even though I may not understand them for the most part or agree with their choices. I definitely understand where they're coming from. I could see that they have their own motives, and I can also understand why they are the way they are and what drives them to want to change their lives. And when you have an anime so strong like Welcome to the NHK, it's no wonder why I still care about this anime to this very day. It's not afraid to take me to places that would otherwise be scary. It's not afraid to just let me go into the deep, dark side of myself, yet also understand that there is hope as long as I keep living my life every day and face new challenges with open arms. And this anime, in its own weird and surreal way, definitely inspired me to do that. I also need to bring up the music, which is absolutely amazing. The opening, especially in the first half with the trumpets being used, was absolutely lovely, considering that this was sung by Roundtable and Nino, and it's known as Pazuru. So you'll realize that the trumpets were being used in the first half mostly to capitalize on the slightly more comedic, let alone lighthearted aspects. But without the trumpet in the later parts, it's basically a lot more serious. And that's also reflected on the ending songs. Odoro Akachan Ningen capitalizes on the dark comedic aspects of Welcome to the NHK, as it shows that, yes, people want to be loved and would even result to trying to be or revert themselves into more childish ways just to try to find acceptance in this cruel world. And it also shows that extreme level of self-loathing and frustration. Whereas with the second ending theme sung by Yui Makino, it shows that, yes, people are lonely people or lonely creatures who need some type of connection. And sometimes you may feel uncomfortable, but there's also that hope that at least you will have people who can understand you. And even if it's just small gestures, at least you could make sure that you live your life as unpredictable as it's gonna be. So welcome to the NHK. What more can I say about this anime that is one of the best pieces of work I have seen from my time in my late teens to something that still holds up to this day in my adult years. It's something I will always admire, defend, and stick my neck out in every single way possible. If you haven't watched Welcome to the NHK, I order you to experience it for yourself. And if you have experienced Welcome to the NHK yourself, please let me know in the comments below who are your favorite characters. Did you understand them? Were you able to relate to them? And what were your favorite episodes? Please, please, please write them down in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching my video. Take care and stay awesome, everybody.